some of the scouts, not myself, had seen the Japanese on the other side of the river. There was a road there and they had a convoy, but the Japanese had bivouacked there for the night, and they could see them, cooking and washing their clothes and all that in the stream. Now we got our battalion's a column of men, right? With the mules, we had to, the mule guys had to take and tie the burlap bags over the mule's mouth so they go Brian or whatever you call it, sounding off. We didn't want no noise at all. We stayed there, and then we had one fella, I think it was the fellow I was telling you from Hawaii, was a good swimmer, to go across that river to see how deep it was. And it turned out it was like up to your chest, something like that. Well, during the night, we all went across that river and got out the embankment of the other side without the Japanese ever knowing we're there. And the thing was to then in the morning at sunrise, attacked. And that's what happened, attacked there, and you could hear the screaming going on and everything else.
Welcome to Triumphant Spirit, America's World War II Generation Speaks. This program is a series of broadcasts featuring the stories of a generation that fought and won the Second World War. No matter how they fought the war or where, on the home front or the battlefield, each veteran featured on the program contributed valiantly to a victory that changed the 20th century. Here are their stories in their own words. They are stories of actions and deeds that not only helped shape the outcome of the war, but the very world we live in today. In August of 1943, President Franklin D. Roosevelt and Prime Minister Winston Churchill decided that an American long-range penetration mission behind Japanese lines in Burma was needed. The objective of the effort was to destroy Japanese supply lines and communications and help reopen the much-needed Burma Road, China's lifeline to the Allies. A presidential call for volunteers for a dangerous and hazardous mission was issued, and approximately 3,000 American soldiers volunteered. That was the beginning of Merrill's Marauders, officially known as the 5307th Composite Unit, code name Galahad. In 1944, the Marauders walked over 1,000 miles through dense and impenetrable jungle to accomplish their mission, a feat which earned them the Presidential Unit Citation. Participating in the campaign was Sergeant Joseph Robinson. He was awarded 3 battle stars while serving with the Marauders. No other American force had as much uninterrupted fighting service as Merrill's Marauders, and Joe Robinson was one of the rare breed of volunteers who lived through it all. Joe, you were an amusement ride mechanic working on the Jersey Shore before being drafted in 1942. What was life like on the Jersey Shore during the early months of World War II?
Well, it was much different than it is today, that's for sure. In those days, I was working at the amusements down there, and there was a place called the Speedway on the boardwalk that had gasoline cars.
And this was in Asbury Park, New Jersey?
Asbury Park, New Jersey. And more or less, I was the manager of it at that time, because I'd worked there quite a few years, really, off and on. And during that time, the boardwalk if you can picture it, they had these curtains up for the whole length of the boardwalk. Every night they'd have to close these dark curtains on the boardwalk so that none of the lights on the shore would penetrate out into the ocean, because you had submarines out there that were sinking ships.
So this is a way of enforcing the blackout regulations that
Right.
existed at the time.
Those curtains had to be closed, and they had patrols going by to make sure there was no light being exposed out on the beach there. And that's some of the things there. They had amusements there in Asbury Park that you could walk the boardwalks at 2 o'clock in the morning or any part of Asbury Park. Never fear of being attacked or anything like that. A whole different life than what you have today.
Joe, what about you personally? What was family life like for you?
Well, my sister and I, we were basically orphans. My mother died when I was 5 years old. My father had died when I was 14, but we were never living with him. We were put into care. Some other people were taking care of us. And it was hard times back then. That's right after the Depression. And the money, as everybody knows, was very scarce at that time. And actually, the little money that I was earning down at the boardwalk was really helping supporting that whole family they had there, other than myself and my sister. And it was very lean times, that's for sure. Is that sort of like what you'd like to?
Yes, Joe, yes. After being drafted, where did you train, and what was training like?
Well, after I got drafted, first place I was inducted to was Fort Dix in New Jersey. From there, I was shipped to Fort Bragg, North Carolina for basic training.
What was it like?
Basic training for 6 weeks, that wasn't that bad, but they were getting you up early in the morning. You had to go through a lot of calisthenics and know a rifle that you could put it together blindfolded, right? After our basic training there, that was on a Christmas in 42, I guess.
42?
Late 42.
Right.
And we were put on a banana boat and shipped right to Panama. When we got to Panama, went through the canal to the west coast, then transported by rail, which is only 50 miles, back to the east coast, and that's where we were stationed there. And we got the jungle training there. And during the jungle training, we had to serve on outpost duty in outlying sections of Panama. I was there, I guess, maybe 3-4 months, could have been 5, I forget offhand. And the word came that we were being shipped back to the States. So we got back on the transport and went through the canal again, back to Frisco. At Frisco, I was sent to Camp Carson, Colorado then. And that was a sort of a staging area there.
Staging area for what, Joe?
Beg your pardon?
A staging area for what at Camp Carson?
It was a staging area. I don't know where we were going to go. They were shipping people all over the world, really, from there. They came through one day for volunteers for a very hazardous operation. All volunteers. Immediate action with hazardous duty. I didn't sign up.
This leads me into my next question.
I didn't sign up at that time. Right. But I had made, beg your pardon?
Well, you did volunteer.
Oh, yes. What happened is I had a friend that I had made during basic training and in Panama. When they came around for this volunteer, he had signed up. And he came back to my barracks and was pleading with me to sign up also because we'd been together for so long. I hesitated and hesitated. He said, come on, come on. Finally, he coaxed me into it. I went with him and we looked up the fellow that was going around looking for these volunteers. We found him. I signed up. Then we had to take a pretty rigid physical. I went through the physical okay. He failed them, and he didn't go. And I was on my way.
Joe, did you know that you were volunteering for the group known as Merrill's Marauders?
Well, we didn't know for what, because they didn't tell you who you were volunteering for. At that time, Merrill's Marauders didn't have no name or nothing. How Merrill's Marauders come about, maybe you know. is President Roosevelt and Winston Churchill had a meeting in Quebec, Canada. During that meeting, they decided there should be American troops in Asia to fight the Japanese. And from that, then they wanted volunteers because we'd be the only and first American troops in Asia. Not very many of us, but we would be there.
Joe, do you recall the amount of volunteers that were in that unit?
Yeah, well, what happened there is they had one group that I was in from the States that volunteered. They had another group from Trinidad and Puerto Rico, I believe, Americans that volunteered. And we got on the SS Loreline in California and shipped out of Frisco there. And we went to Hawaii on the boat. It was a big boat. The SS Loreline was a passenger ship, a huge one at that time, that used to travel between Frisco and Hawaii. And we had eventually 3,000 men on that boat. From Hawaii, we never got off the boat there in Hawaii. From there we went to Australia. We landed in a port, northern part of Australia, Brisbane, I believe. We didn't get off the boat there. We went to the southern part of Australia, and there we picked up a volunteer group that volunteered out of Guadalcanal at that time. There was a lot of fighting going on there. This group volunteered there. So now you had 3 columns of men, or 3 battalions, let's say, which I understand would come up to about 2,800 men altogether. And from there, then this boat took us on to India. We were on that boat for 47 days or something like that, with never no leave or nothing. Only thing has happened when we were in the southern part of Australia, they took everybody off the boat and made a parade through the town. And that was something there because it was a fairly small town. And the people there, were all just parading through the town, the group of us, and they'd run out of the taverns or buildings with these pitchers of beers and hand them to the guys as they're marching and like that, And we got back on the boat, and from there, on into India.
Joe, how did you feel about being in uniform at this particular time?
Being in uniform?
In uniform at this particular time, knowing that you're going to enter into a theater of war.
I knew it was going to be immediate action. At that time, we didn't know where we were going. No, they never told us, and even until we're about halfway to India did we find out we're actually going to India. And everybody's curious what's going on, where are we going to be, what are we going to be doing, or what's the mission. We landed in Bombay in India. And when we got off the boat in Bombay, we had to go then across India. Why they didn't go to Calcutta, the boat was so huge, they didn't have the draft in Calcutta Harbor to, service that boat, so they had to go to Bombay. At Bombay, then we had to go by train, ferry boat, walk, and everything else to the other side of India, up into Assam, the northeastern part of India. I say eastern, towards China, if you want to call it. And that was quite a ride because we were on many different trains, some of them wide gauge trains, which we don't have in this country. And depending on the terrain up there, then you'd have to get off and switch to narrow gauge trains. And you're going through all these Indian towns and villages, and that's something like you never seen before.
Okay, now that you're in India and Assam province, again, how did you feel as an American in uniform in this theater of war?
Well, it was an odd feeling because everybody that in that country looked at us as we're on this train or what have you going through the country as Rajas, meaning we're all millionaires. That's how they took to us, And they'd be running up to the train in these places at the station. We may stop for water or whatever and hollering, "Boxy, Boxy." That means they want something from you, you know. And you could see these people really needed whatever you could give them. And a lot of the fellows at that time, we had maybe sea rations or something, would, you know, hand over a chocolate bar or what. We didn't have that much, but just riding those trains alone, that was an experience in itself. As anybody that was in our group knows, these trains, when you were in them, they were more like cattle cars, really, with seats. You couldn't walk from one coach to the next coach. Once you got on that coach, you were in that coach. It was like our trains, you can walk the whole length of the train, right? Not there with those. You're stuck on that coach. And during our experience, the Indians at that time, they'd get on those trains and they eat and everything else. All you had is wooden seats with, and the food crack, you know, crumbs could fall down into the cracks, but you had a lot of cockroaches, right? So one night we're on there and someone had one of these aero bombs, right, for spraying. They sprayed, and you should have seen that. We had to get up on our seats, standing up, because the cockroaches were just falling out of the ceiling, you know, out of all these cracks around there. That was an experience in itself. You no way you could get off or anything else. I don't know if that's the kind of things you like to hear about.
Joe, yes, because believe it or not, they're historical moments. They're historical moments.
Yeah.
When did you become aware of the mission of your unit, now known as Merrill's Marauders?
Well, this we didn't know of Merrill's Marauders. The outfit never even had a name at this time. And we wound up in Assam, a training camp, more or less. It wasn't a professional type training center, but was a tent set up and like that. There was a river or a lake, not a lake, it was a river really. Not too wide there. And we did some jungle training there, going out on patrols and like that. And why I remember that place so well is we'd go down there to wash into the water, right? And then, or clothes or what have you. You had no laundry over there. And we had just come from across country in that long boat ride. I'd say I was out of shape, right? But anyhow, some of the fellows were swimming to the other side of this river, which would, I'd say, 150, 200 feet wide maybe at that time. Somewhere it's like that, I didn't measure it. I attempted to swim across also with one of my friends, but he was a very tall fellow, slim we call him. And I'm out in the middle and I know I'll never be able to make it back. So I started to come back and I got exhausted. And Slim I seen him up to about his chin. He said, "Joe, don't come here." He says, "because I'm just standing on my toe." He said, "You'll never make it." And I tried to swim back and I couldn't. And I was really going down for about the third time. I'm hollering for help, right? It's a funny feeling if you're ever get in that predicament, you know you're going to drown. And you see all these people on the shore and nothing they can do. None of them are attempting to come out. One fella did. He came out and he got to me. He says, "Oh no, not this fella." He came out and he was holding me underwater anyhow, so I had to break away from him. Although the guy was trying to help me, but he just didn't have the experience in it. Finally, another fella came out that knew what he was doing. He said, "Look," so I'm going to try and save you, but if you do grab me any way at all, he says, "I'm going to let you go." But he got me back to shore, almost drowned. And I was completely exhausted when I got there. But the odd part is, 2 days later, 1 or 2 days later, another fellow did drown the same spot that I was in. I was down there like 3 days later. They had thrown grenades and dynamite, trying to raise his body, because this was a very deep place. We had one fellow in the group from Hawaii who was an excellent swimmer. He never could touch bottom there. But anyhow, about 3 days later, I'm down there washing up again, and right in front of me comes up this body from the fellow that had drowned, you know. And I looked at him, and in my mind, I could see that could have been me, you know. I don't know if you like to hear that.
Joe, no, but it's important for people to understand the type of training that you did go through at this particular time in preparation for what you're going to experience really within the upcoming months.
This was a training area.
So very, very important to hear that.
And
Can you tell us how Merrill's Marauders was named?
Well, what happened there was the first name that they had given the outfit, I believe, was Galahad. And then they come along with a name such as the War Department did as a 5037th Provisional Unit, Composed Provisional Unit. And that hung with us and probably still to today. And but in the meantime, news had got out with news reporters and that, from what I understand. Some newspaper more or less gave us the nickname of Merrill's Marauders, and that's how it become to be Merrill's Marauders.
Where'd the name Merrill come from?
That was General Merrill. He was put in trouble. When we first got there, we were under British command, British food and everything else for a short period of time, or I should say British rations, let's say. And then Lord Mountbatten, you've heard of him. He was supposedly going to be our leader, along with working with the British. Then, from what I understand, there was a conflict between them and Stilwell and some of the other people, right, in Washington. And finally, what happened is then they brought in this General Merrill to take over the outfit, and that's really...
And so therefore, then, Merrill's Marauders.
Merrill's Marauders.
What was the mission of the Marauders, and where did they train?
Well, where we left off from was in Lido. That's right at the border of India and Burma. And they also had part of the Lido Road built there that was supposedly going to connect with the Burma Road eventually. I think the British had started that, really, but they never got too far with that Lido Road, really.
The Lido Road was a
from
proposed
India
supply route from India
to China,
through Burma
really.
to China.
Well, to the Burma Road, really.
Right, which was not
and
completed.
And then gone into China.
Right, because of the Japanese invasion.
Right. And,
now again, what was the mission of the Marauders?
Well, we were going there as a guerrilla outfit, really, and harass them. And from my understanding, the Chinese armies that they did have in there, they would get to a place and it was hard to get them to move because, from what I understand, the Chinese army wasn't really getting paid. They weren't having good rations to begin with, or supplies. From what I gather, our mission was to do the penetration, go in, harass, and hit the Japanese. And then we'd never stay and hold the place. If we were there for a while, we'd dig our own foxholes or, come in. And I've had Chinese soldiers come in and take my place in that foxhole, and we'd reassemble and go on to another place. That's the way it operated. One time, we were coming out of the hills, and there was a valley with a stream coming down, pretty big stream. I guess it went into the Irrawaddy somewhere along the way. I don't know. And
the Irrawaddy being the main river through Burma.
And what happened is, coming down, some of the scouts, not myself, had seen the Japanese on the other side of the river. There was a road there, and they had a convoy, but the Japanese had bivouacked there for the night, and they could see them, cooking and washing their clothes and all that in the stream. Now, we got our battalion's a column of men, right? With the mules, we had to, the mule guys had to take and tie the burlap bags over the mule's mouth so they couldn't they go Brian or whatever you call it, sounding off. We didn't want no noise at all. We stayed there, and then we had one fella, I think it was the fellow I was telling you from Hawaii, was a good swimmer, to go across that river to see how deep it was. And it turned out it was like up to your chest, something like that. Well, during the night, we all went across that river and got out the embankment of the other side without the Japanese ever knowing we're there. And the thing was to then, in the morning at sunrise, attacked. And that's what happened. Attacked there, and you could hear the screaming going on and everything else.
What do you remember most of that action?
Going across that river, because after we held that spot for a while, then I believe the Chinese stayed there to take it. Then we were called back across the river, and we had a rope to guide us back across, right? Because there was a stream there, and it was deep. Maybe if you got a fellow, it was not my height or something, they were quite shorter, he may not make it. You're carrying your guns and ammunition and everything else with you. And then we had this rope to go back across, but then there was the snipers up there that were taking pop shots at the people crossing this. That was a concern there.
Joe,
From there, we went on to another mission. Overall, they gave us, I think it was 3 Bronze Stars for 3 major battles that we were in, and I think something like 17 minor skirmishes we were involved with.
Joe, for our audience that have never really experienced war as you have experienced, could you walk us through that ambush that took place on the banks of that river?
If I understand you want to know...
What took place?
Oh, well, you mean the condition we were faced with going through there?
Right, and the action that took place on the banks of the river.
Oh, on the banks of the river. On that particular one, like I say, at sunrise, we opened fire, right? And I can't say that I actually killed anyone, but you fire, you know where the fire is coming from, right? And okay, on that spot there, like I say, there was a road right alongside of this bivouac area that a road isn't very wide out there at this particular time. They did have the communication lines on that road. With our outfits, we had 1 or 2 Japanese American soldiers with us. They're all volunteers too. And what we did there, I didn't have any control over it, but supposedly the Japanese went up, American Japanese, went up and tapped the lines to see what information they could get. Whether it's true or not, what I heard was that they said they heard where they wanted to capture one of the Merrill's Marauders alive, right? And which they never did, as far as I know.